A Belgian officer had been dispatched with a force of some 50 or 60 men to capture a chief. In rummaging in the huts for plunder, they came upon two women, a mother and a daughter, who'd not had time to get away. They were brought up before the officer, who demanded of them where the chief was in hiding. They either did not know or would not tell. He ordered them to be secured and laid out on the ground, and a stalwart soldier then proceeded to administer 50 strokes of the shakot to each. The flogging continued until each had received 200 lashes. Finally, the Belgian officer ordered his men to cut off the breasts of the women and leave them there to die where they lay. I'm Shooey, and this is Strangeful Things.
Sheltering in place is not advised, as your survival cannot be ensured in that scenario.
Love has practically caused me to just get you destroyed.
Unsolved, unresolved, and super complicated.
Strangeful Things.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Strangeful Things. We're back this week in the Congo with part 2 of our discussion on King Leopold II and the Red Rubber Terror. But before we get to that, we hope you all enjoyed Acadia's very special Thanksgiving reunion special. I thought it was really nice that Acadia took time to speak with his oh-so-many discarded partners. I'm here this week with Acadia, and if the trend holds, fellow short-timer Mel's. What's new with you guys this week?
That was amazing. Very good. Well, I want everyone to know that the takeout dinner I had for Thanksgiving was very good, and it worked very well. So that might be a yearly tradition, COVID or not.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm glad it worked out for you.
Yeah, that is pretty jolly.
Yeah.
Now, as far as your cracks in the beginning, I really got nothing. The fact is that part in Brokeback Mountain where he says, "I can't quit you." I've never said that.
You can quit anybody.
I can quit anybody. No, the fact is that, and as exemplified by the fact that everybody except Low Constitution Store Christy did come back. The fact is that people get busy and they have shit to do and everything like that. So I love all my former co-hosts just like I love you guys. The exact amount is equal.
Wow.
I don't know that that's good or not.
Yeah, it can go one way or the other. As far as my new and good was concerned, since we are doing like low carb,
yeah,
she made an experiment, and in the entire time we've been married, there have been 2 experiments that were failures, and this Thanksgiving was one of them.
Oh, no.
Yep. Well, it was a recipe that we said, "Oh, that looks like it might be neat. You know, we should try it, whatever like that." And she tried it, and it was stuffing.
Yeah.
But instead of bread, it was pork rinds.
Oh, well, I've always heard that was good.
Well, here's the thing. If you took a picture of it, it looked like a commercial for stuffing. It looked perfect. Because pork rinds are already golden brown, so like everything was perfectly colored and everything like that. Problem with it is that the way they had you cook it, in her words, it took the pork rind and just turned it back into pork skin. So it wasn't so much the taste as it was the texture.
Right.
So
yeah, that's nasty.
It was tough, huh?
Yeah, and actually, She ate hers because she said, "I made it, I'm eating it," but I didn't like it.
Oh.
Well, Mrs. Axe pretty tough then.
Yeah. The rest of it was marvelous. Yeah. Just marvelous. And we didn't have to worry about, since our mothers are dead, we didn't have to worry about fighting with them about coming to visit. And nobody wanted to visit us anyway, so it turned out just to be us.
There you go. Yeah, the kids didn't come home because they have like a week left of school, and so we went to my sister-in-laws and brother-in-laws and went with my mother-in-law, and it was nice. They did a really nice job and stuff, so it was fun. I'm glad.
Oh, so you're a super spreader.
It was just 5 of us in the house, so shit.
Oh, that doesn't count.
They're in the bubble.
Yeah, that's
not super.
That's not. Well, it may be spreading, but it's not super.
Exactly.
But other than that, everything's good. And for those of you who know that we love the show Damn Fine TV, we just recorded something with us on it. So look out for that.
That's right.
That's my new and good that I'm very excited about.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
Yeah.
We had to go over and see what all the fuss was about since Mel's is always moonlighting over there.
Yeah. But unlike that show that gets to talk about fun things like what's on TV,
we're us.
We're back this week to conclude our history of the Congo Free State, a.k.a. the Belgian Congo, a.k.a. Zaire, a.k.a. the Democratic Republic of the Congo, as it is known now. And but before I start, I just want to take a little editor's note to everyone. Just making sure that you all know, and I'm sure those of you who listen do, that we here at Strangeful Things understand the seriousness and the horrors of what we're describing. Sure, we try to do it in a way that, for lack of a better word, is fun or entertains, but and that may sometimes kind of come across as a little disrespectful, but it's really just done to try to make the subject easier to take in, right? I don't want you all being as miserable as me, which, if you were to ask my family, especially, or my fellow grackles, is pretty fucking miserable.
Yep.
Right?
He is a miserable fucker, people.
Yeah. So I guess I just hate that there's still shit that I don't know about, and I'm 30 years old now. Nobody's buying that.
I didn't know that I was older than you all this time.
I know.
Wow.
We always pretend like I'm old.
Yeah, but I'm the old one.
You fool everyone with your constant watching of children's television programming.
Children's television and television from the 60s and 70s. But I guess the point is, though, that whether it be shit like the Tulsa Race Massacre or finding out that my hometown where I grew up, was a sundown town on Long Island in New York, or just shit like this, like what we're talking about here, I just think sometimes the truth sucks. But I think we owe it to the people who suffered to tell the truth of what happened, right? And I know that the shit we're talking about isn't fun, but it is important. And that's kind of why I beat myself up with this shit. So last episode, we learned about good old King Leo II of Belgium, who in 1885 was granted personal ownership of the Congo for the next 20 years with the help of concession companies that he leased land to, as well as his own force publique, which was his personal army. The Congolese people were forced to serve their, colonial masters and shit. But in this episode, we're going to read some really fun firsthand accounts from the Congo Free State. But to counterbalance that, we're also going to learn about some good people who tried to help the Congolese people and expose these terrors. And finally, if there's time, we're going to discuss what's happened to the Congo since Leopold. So let's jump right in with all this fun, with some firsthand accounts from folks who were there.
All right, I'm just reading this. I wasn't there.
Yes. Well, the native that you're going to say was there.
Oh, yeah, that's true. From a native discussing the aftermath of an attack on his village. After 3 days, we returned to the village. We saw dead bodies, and we saw hanging on a line fixed between 2 sticks, tied up genital organs.
From a missionary, we passed a man on the road who had broken his back by falling from a tree while tapping some vines.
Was that it with that? Like,
yeah,
so they just passed. You don't say we stopped to help a man on the road.
I know, like reading it, I was like, wow.
For fuck's sake, rub some mud on it or something, guys.
there's got to be something like
You're a missionary.
Gave him a banana, like this guy, like I gave him a cross so God could heal him. Like,
oh my God!
At least try.
Oh, I know. That's why I was reading it. I was like, damn, you just left it there. I mean,
it's not even a dot like there's more. It's just dot.
That's it. That's all he did was pass him.
Period.
What do they say now? On period?
Period.
Yeah.
Period.
From George Bricus, a force publique officer. The women taken during the last raid are causing me no end of trouble. All the soldiers want one. The sentries, who are supposed to watch them, unchain the prettiest ones and rape them.
Ugh.
Oh, man. From another native discussing treatment of the workers. When they were beating them, they received up to 20 lashes. They were not allowed to eat, and they were not allowed to drink water. Many people died when they received this treatment. Their, meaning the soldiers, words when they were lashing people, they would explain that they came to put an end to the Congolese suffering and that they brought them a better civilization. Oh, okay. All right. So they were helping then, right? So I guess it was okay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It felt like helping.
Right.
If we say it's helping, right?
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So just be grateful that I cut about 8 of those out. One of the first
want us
people
to just keep doing basically the same voice over and over.
Exactly. One of the first people, though, to catch on to it, Leo and Stanley, who, if you remember from the first half, was the person that Leo sent to the Congo to kind of be his man there, was an African-American journalist named George Washington Williams. He had actually originally set off for the Congo looking to see this benevolent state that the world was talking about. Unfortunately, that obviously wasn't what he was going to find there. He stayed for about 6 months, and he actually wrote an open letter to King Leopold titled Tyranny, which appeared in the New York Herald in 1890.
I accuse Leopold's officials of tyranny. I accuse Leopold's government of excessive cruelty. Ox chains eat into the necks of prisoners and produce sores about which flies circle. The courts are abortive, unjust, and delinquent. Not one state official knows the language of the natives. Your Majesty's government is engaged in slave trade, wholesale, and retail. Leopold's Congo state is guilty of crimes against humanity.
Well, this letter actually became a sensation. Like, it was printed in newspapers all over the world and magazines. But unfortunately for the Congolese, it didn't take much for Leo to just brush it off as fake news. Couldn't help myself. In response to the letter, Leo wrote to the Belgian prime minister, who wanted to know what the fuck was going on. The Congo state is certainly not a business. If it gathers ivory in certain lands, that is only to lessen its deficit. In dealing with a race composed of cannibals for thousands of years, it is necessary to use methods that will shake their idleness and make them realize the sanctity of work. Yeah, the work in the Congo contributed to just so much fucking death. Disease killed millions. The African sleeping sickness, the swine flu, dysentery, smallpox. Yeah. It's just not olden times without diarrhea.
That's right.
In 1901 alone.
Diarrhea.
Exactly. In 1901 alone, 500,000 Congolese died from African sleeping sickness. As disease ravaged the people, the children, of course, are the most vulnerable. Here is a lovely quote from a nun from a letter written in 1895.
Several of the girls were so sickly on their arrival that our good sisters couldn't save them. But all had the happiness of receiving holy baptism. They are now little angels in heaven who are praying for our great King.
Oh, the lovely little heathens get to go to heaven.
Hey, that's a real thing. Like,
yeah.
It's true.
It's a real thing.
I mean, it's a real thing that, like, in the
that they say in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
They don't even say it in other Christians. That's a Catholic thing.
You mean the quitters?
Yeah, exactly. I think the kids would have preferred a little medicine, maybe some food, but I guess Jesus is good for some stuff. I guess what really can he cure, I guess, other than whatever these girls had.
Other than everything everyone dies of.
I don't know. Those Christian scientists don't all die when they pray, right? I guess sometimes something happens. Well, George Washington Williams was the only person who went to the Congo who wasn't a monster. Lucky them. There was also William Shepherd. He was an African-American missionary who actually went there to do good. Sure, his plan was to shove Jesus down everyone's throats, but at least he treated them like people. He bothered to learn their language, which, as we learned, the people who ran the court system didn't even bother to fucking do. And the chief of this tribe, the Kuba, actually thought that he had possessed the spirit of his dead son, which I don't have written, but I'm going to tell you a quick story, which actually almost cost him his life, because after a little bit of time, another tribe took over the Kuba. And what happens when the ruling family changes, they kill all members of the previous ruling family. And since they said that that he possessed the spirit of his son, they actually invited him to the other guy's camp, and they were going to kill him, but decided not to.
Oh, my gosh.
That's an interesting little side story.
I like that.
I'm still hung up on the court not speaking the language thing. Like, did they just go, well, what do you have to say for yourself? Well, I don't fucking know what he said, so guilty.
What are you trying to tell us?
Guilty or innocent?
Oh,
I don't know what he's saying.
Christ.
Yeah. So Shepherd did what he could also to try to bring what was going on in the Congo to light. He had articles printed in newspapers across the U.S. and Europe, and he wrote,
"The chief conducted us to a framework of sticks, under which was burning a slow fire, and there they were, the right hands. I counted them, 81 in all."
Yikes.
A Belgian politician, having read what Shepherd had written, called the Cinquantenaire, which was a monument built in Brussels to celebrate Belgium's 50th anniversary of being a country. As expected, paid for by Congo money. They called it the Arch of the Severed Hands.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Jesus.
So it wasn't even like this stuff was secret to the people then, which is what's most, I think, fucked up about it. Joseph Conrad, who you may remember from high school, was another person who believed in Leo's humanitarian mission until he actually arrived in the Congo. Conrad spent 6 months as a steamboat captain on the Congo, and he came back with tales of horror that he turned into the novella Heart of Darkness.
Oh, the horror. That one?
That was beautiful. Yes, that was the one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Leo then, wanting to make a big splash on the world stage, remember, all of this is about building up Belgium as a legitimate country. Leo secured the 1897 World's Fair to be held in Brussels. He wanted to make the Congo the main attraction. So he had fair organizers build him what they called a living tableau.
Mm-mm.
That's right, a human zoo. So they took 267 Congolese from their homes in the Congo and placed them in artificial copies of Congolese villages at the fair. There was a river village and a forest village and a civilized village. That's actually what they called it.
Oh, my God.
That included mostly force publique soldiers that were just wearing European-looking uniforms, which I guess is why they were civilized. The Belgian people and fairgoers loved the exhibit. People would toss treats like candy at the villagers. And Leo found out that the candy was making a lot of the Congolese sick. He basically had them put up a "Don't feed the animal" sign. He was a bit smoother than that, of course. He had the sign say, "The blacks are fed by the organizing committee."
Oh, Jesus.
That's not better.
I know. Like, I know these are different fucking times and shit, like 100 and whatever years ago, but people had to see that this shit was fucked up, right?
I don't know. I would think that if you were the kind of person that wanted to go to the human zoo, that you would also want to feel like you were helping by throwing candy at human beings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Also, Also, I want to feel better about myself because nobody put me in a zoo.
Right.
And I subsist on a diet mainly of chalk.
Yeah. But this is something my daughter pointed out, who's all very political and shit, talking about museums. Did you ever notice that in museums, when they have dioramas of people, they're never white people?
Right.
Unless there are other people in it. Like
right.
if it's Native Americans and pilgrims or whatever, that may happen, but they would never just have like a pilgrim village in a museum like that.
Well, no, because that's where they if you're white people, then you get to be in a living museum where it's like
right,
colonial Jamestown and shit like that.
Yeah,
because those people get paid.
Like Williamsburg, right?
Yeah,
exactly. Right. Dioramas don't get paid all that much.
That's right.
They just have to be dusted every once in a while.
Terrible.
All right. So on to another good guy. All right.
Edmund D. Morel.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. There aren't a lot of good guys here, but at least there's a few. This guy, Edmund Dean Morel, was a British shipping clerk who worked at a Liverpool in England. His company did a lot of business with companies in the Congo, and that he noticed that tons of resources, ivory and rubber especially, were coming from the Congo and going to Belgium. But almost nothing other than guns were being shipped into the Congo. He also noticed that there were huge profits being skimmed off the top, which I don't understand accounting why a shipping clerk would know that, but he did. Morel wrote,
"These bags are full of money. They shouldn't have put dollar signs on them. I would never figured it out."
That's not what he wrote. All right. He wrote, get ready for this.
Oh, this is going to be good.
The figures told their own story. Forced labor of a terrible and continuous kind could alone explain such profits. It must be bad enough to stumble upon a murder. I stumbled upon a secret society of murderers.
That was beautiful.
I felt like I was at Bly Manor. That was so British.
Oh, thank you. I tried my hardest on that one.
Morel left his shipping clerk job and used what he learned digging into Leo to actually become a leading investigative journalist. He would publish his history of the Congo Reform Association. This was a group that he founded in order to help the people of the Congo and bring down Leo. He took it very personally what Leo was doing.
But like, it seems like a lot of the good people who found out what all these horrible things were, their main course of action was to tell a bunch of people who kind of didn't care.
Right.
Like,
that's true.
Right.
Putting it in the newspaper is just like, well, look at this, Martha. Aren't you glad you don't live there? Eat some more chalk. Ha-ha. And that's it. Like, that's all they did.
Know. It's true. Well, the next guy we're going to talk about was actually sent by the British government. And the Congo Reform Association thing, that actually did start to bring it to light. And in 1903, the British Parliament actually, I guess they came down hard on Leo, saying that he didn't live up to all of his promises, which is pretty hardcore stuff. That's pretty hardcore from British people, I think.
Tough stuff.
Did not quite live up to his promises. But but the last good person who, like I said, was sent by the British government to look into the Congo was Sir Roger Casement. He was actually an Irishman who was sent to the Congo by the British to find the truth. And as a testament to the work that Morell had done, Casement's report ended up including all the same stuff that Morell had found, only Morell did it from an office thousands of miles away, just looking at ledgers and shit. So that's pretty wild stuff. In his report back to the British Foreign Office, Casement stated that
of the persistent mutilation by government soldiers, there can be no shadow of a doubt. Should the system maintain forced labour on this scale, I believe the entire population will be extinct in 30 years. Infamous, shameful system.
Yeah, well, the British ambassador to Belgium actually fought to suppress this report.
No, of course.
While Leo's cousin wasn't queen anymore, they were still pretty tight, the two countries. But it had gotten out and they couldn't stop it from being released.
Because it was infamous.
It was infamous. Shameful system.
And to tell you the truth, what also was infamous is that I never really went. I just took what the other guy did and wrote it in my own handwriting. I'm a fraud. Well, shameful system.
Shameful system of copying things. Well, with all this shit coming out, Leo had some serious spinning to do. Because he was just aghast, I tell you, to find out what was going on in his Congo.
Yeah.
So he went to newspapers and shit like everybody else. And instead of just saying how all the great things he was doing, he would pass on stories of what the other colonial leaders were doing to make what he was doing seem better.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and ever the creative thinker, he said that Casement, having commented on the many Congolese people missing their hands, had only seen Congolese who suffered from a very rare hand cancer, apparently, who needed those hands surgically amputated.
Oh, my God. You have got to be kidding me.
Yeah. So a lot of right hand cancer.
Only in apparently. The right hand, huh?
Yeah, only in the right hand.
If this cancer fell into the wrong hands, no.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that just seems like the kind of thing where you'd go, well, wait a minute. Just how stupid are the people that are asking us questions?
Yeah.
I mean, let's not even make it they're always sticking their hands in the rubber trees and there's snakes that bite them and we have to cut their hands off fast so the venom doesn't kill them. Where they got bit by a zombie or some shit. Like, there's a million more credible stories than hand cancer.
Right?
Yeah. But I guess around 1900, what did people know about cancer, right? They didn't know anything about it.
That's true.
It was just a scary disease that
he's got Trippington's rot.
Exactly.
Stupid.
So you are such a knucklehead. So with the world beginning to see Leo for what he actually was, he sent a commission of Belgian judges to the Congo to, quote unquote, discover the truth and show how wonderful Leopold's Congo was. Only it didn't quite go that way. The commission heard from the Congolese firsthand, and judges wept when they heard what the people had to say. These judges were not going to find in favor of Leo. So Leo had no choice, but he had to get rid of his problem. The profits weren't worth all the bad press he was getting. And so he had promised to give the Congo to Belgium when he died. But I guess he changed his mind since he wasn't dying when he was giving it to them. He wanted to be paid. So in 1908, he sold Belgium the Congo. He made him pay him about 200 million francs or something around $10 billion in today's money. This covered all the debt he accumulated, money for his building projects because there were lots of statues and monuments and museums and shit that he wanted to build for himself. And they also wanted to make sure to reward him as a mark of gratitude for his great sacrifices for the Congo. He also received property in Belgium. He had like 58 pieces of property in Brussels alone, and he got property on the French Riviera. He also got shares of a bunch of the concession companies. But he didn't really want anybody to know what had happened there, right? So in order to erase everything that Leo and his people had done in the Congo, they had all of the state's archives burned. In a letter to an aide, Leo wrote, "I will give them my Congo, but they have no right to know what I did there."
But question. He ran the Congo. I mean, he ran Belgium. So he was just giving it to himself.
But he made it when he got it that it didn't belong to Belgium. It personally belonged to him.
Right.
Yeah, no, I know.
I know it's fucked up because he's the king of Belgium. So you would think that if it's his, it's Belgium's, but it wasn't.
It's just very frustrating.
It can be.
Hey, Mels.
Hey, Jasmine.
You want to tell these lovely people about our show?
Well, I sure do. We're the hosts of the Damn Fine TV podcast,
a weekly show where two TV-loving ladies,
that's us,
bring you fresh insights and fun conversations about all things TV.
The name of our show is a reference to Twin Peaks.
Damn fine coffee.
But we discuss a wide variety of shows, everything from Chilling Adventures of Sabrina to American Horror Story,
Westworld, Umbrella Academy, Lovecraft Country, and tons more.
And now for the obligatory clip segment of the ad.
What even are the tardigrade mysteries?
I need a timeline!
That's getting a trash flag.
Who is in you?
Confused? Better subscribe and listen to the show.
We've got new episodes every Wednesday.
Just search Damn Fine TV wherever you listen to podcasts, and we'll be there.
And come hang out with us on Instagram at Damn Fine TV. We share TV news, celebrities that make us thirsty, and have fun polls.
And if you're watching TV,
make sure it's Damn Fine TV.
Interestingly enough, though, things weren't only going bad in the Congo for Leo, as he really wasn't liked amongst his own people. But not so shockingly, it had nothing to do with what he was doing in the Congo. After all, the Belgians liked that the country was wealthy, right? It became respected in only a few years. Like it didn't take hundreds of years to become something respected. And nobody really cared if all of this was done on the backs of people who didn't benefit from it or only suffered because of it. That isn't a familiar theme in history at all. The reason people disliked him actually had more to do with his very public contempt for his wife and daughters. He also had a problem, like his dad, with fucking around with young girls. It's said that Leo enjoyed the company of girls as young as 10.
Oh, sick. That's disgusting.
That's how fucking gross this guy was.
And here I was ready to write it off if she was like 14 because it was olden times. But
it was older times. Yeah,
nope.
Well, nope. 10's still bad.
Jesus Christ.
But alas, in 1909, only a year after he had sold the Congo, tragedy struck the people of Belgium as Leo II, one of the world's greatest pieces of shit, died of an intestinal blockage, having never stepped foot in the Congo.
Wow. So he died because he couldn't take a shit.
Yeah, he was all clogged up.
Wow.
Poor guy.
He was a literal piece of shit.
Jesus.
Crappy.
Literally full of shit, that one.
Well, the good thing is that this ended this terrible period in African history. Well, it ended this period, but a new period started right after it.
Yes. And there were several concurrent periods occurring at the time.
Of horribleness. See, the horrors of the Congo continued, but don't get me wrong, it was nothing like Leo. Everyone had two hands for the most part. but it hasn't really been smooth sailing for the peoples. They see in the World War periods, rubber and other elements that are plentiful in the Congo, like copper, were in big demand, right? And Belgium was an ally. So unfortunately, though, war can bring out the worst in people, and the Belgians just couldn't help themselves, so they went back to the same shit that Leo did. They would do it a little differently. They would send a recruiter to a village with a bunch of soldiers. That's a similar theme. But they would give the tribal chief a quota of workers to give them. So instead of making the quota, you have to produce, 100 pounds of rubber. It's now you have to give me 10 people. So the chiefs would pick out the people they liked least.
Oh,
You get like 10 Acadias lined up, chain them up, and send them off to work in the mines or something. But the chief would get paid a couple bucks a person. So, it was a business.
Oh. Yeah.
In the words of Jules Marchal, a former Belgian official in the Congo, on the Belgians' continued use of the shakot. Remember the hippo hide whip that we talked about in the first half of this? They continued to use it until 1959.
Wow.
Yikes.
That's great. Great. Every morning, we called the people of the village, and then the prisoners came before me. These people got whipped in front of everybody. The whip was being used to tell these people, look, if you do not do what I say, if you will not pick the cotton, if you will not do the maintenance on the roads, you will be whipped as well. Do you understand? That was the system that is based on fear. One could say that the Congo was made with the whip.
During this time of Belgian rule, the Belgians never actually worked with the Congolese people, right? So they were kind of living life as if they were always going to be in charge. So they never built any infrastructure. Any infrastructure that was built was strictly there to extract natural resources from the Congo. Nothing was ever built to help the Congolese. No schools, no hospitals, nothing like that. Just train lines and highways to pump out all their shit. In World War II, 80% of the uranium used in Fat Man and Little Boy, the two bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, came from the Congo. That should kind of hinge in on one of the countries that was heavily invested in the Congo. Country that didn't want the Congo's resources going to the highest bidder. Of course, talking about the United States.
Of course. Yeah. Good old US
We have to get our hands in there.
America.
You see, in the 50s, the sentiment started to grow. Not that they weren't always unhappy, but they never had a leader amongst the Congolese people. But they had one come the 50s. His name was Patrice Lumumba. Lumumba was a nationalist who had seen all the devastation brought upon his country by outsiders. He saw that there was vast wealth within the borders of the Congo, but it didn't belong to the Congolese. He thought that they should be the owners of their own destiny. The Belgians and others, United States, feared Lumumba would set an example for other Africans to follow. After all, you still had the British getting rich off South African diamonds. They also feared the idea of the Congolese people having a say over their own resources. They had shit like uranium. So what if they decided they wanted to sell it to the Soviet Union or China or something, right?
Do you want to know another, shitty thing about America that played into all of this colonization after World War II?
Sure. I always love a good story.
So America, before World War II started, America was in the Great Depression, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And Europeans had all these colonies, but then most, if not all, of World War II, or the vast majority of World War II, was fought in Europe.
Right.
So Europe was all blown up. And the countries, the European countries, didn't have any money. And the only way they were going to get any money to pay America to rebuild all their shit
was by America letting all the countries get their colonies back. Like, there were letters upon letters written to FDR from one person in a country that said, look, we'll fight for you in the war. We'll do anything. Just don't let the French back.
Right.
And that person was Ho Chi Minh from Vietnam. But America was like, well, no, we need somebody to have money to buy all our shit. So because we don't want to go back into the Depression. So everybody gets their colonies back. Hooray. And so there was a greedy financial incentive for America to make sure that the colonies were recolonized after the war.
Oh, that's lovely.
The more you know.
Well, yeah, that is.
Yeah. A star just went across the screen.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to digress. It's just that was the first time that had ever come up, which is surprising in any of our episodes.
Yeah. Well, so Belgium finally decided to give the Congo a chance at independence. They actually had what was called the Brussels Roundtable Conference, and Lumumba was invited to it to participate. And in 1960, the Congolese held their first democratic election. And they elected Patrice Lumumba as prime minister. But the not wanting the Congolese uranium to be available to anybody else, the Belgians closed down the uranium mines before giving the Congolese back their country. And by closed down, I mean they filled everything with cement and flooded the area so it could never be used again.
Oh, no.
Yeah. They were good. Well, it's good because they can't get to the uranium now. So what they do is there's like uranium in the dirt. So they bag the dirt up like you would buy like soil, and they sell this dirt to like Russia and China now. So
really?
Yeah, it's pretty fucked up.
So basically they're just walking around on uranium?
Yes. Yeah, we'll get into that in a few minutes too with what they're doing now. In June 1960, the Belgian king Baudouin, came to the Congo to grant the people their freedom from Belgian rule. And this was in Leopoldville, which was the capital at that time.
Fucking.
And he, unable to really read the room, he said to the Congolese, after 75 years of Belgian oppression, which of course had been, preceded by even other stuff, that
the independence of the Congo is the crowning of the work conceived by the genius of King Leopold II, undertaken by him with courage and continued by Belgium with perseverance.
Oh my God.
That's beautiful. See, now Lumumba didn't enjoy that speech so much. So in his speech, he kind of railed on about the horrors of colonialism and how he wanted the people to have control over their future. And that meant economic freedom. So like we said before, this scared Western powers. So both the U.S. and the Belgians started planning on ways to remove Lumumba from office. See, we love free elections, except when the outcome isn't what we want. Yeah. So the Belgians decided that they were going to try to organize a coup. The U.S., using a CIA, took a bit of a more direct approach and worked with a warlord, a General Mobutu Sese Seko Kuku Mbendu wa Zabanga. Yeah, that's his full name. Who we will refer to as Mobutu because that's just a lot easier.
Yeah.
So he organized a mutiny of the military just days after independence. So again, like you have the Congolese people working against the Congolese people. So at this time, the United Nations also had soldiers in the Congo. You see, the Belgians, again worried about the resources, had asked the UN to jump in to stop Katanga, and especially rich region, from breaking off on its own. So you have the elected leader of the Congo, Lumumba, fighting the UN in his own country that he was elected to be president of at the behest of Belgians and Americans. The UN closed airports, radio stations. So Lumumba couldn't even talk to the people. So he couldn't even try to get them to rally around him and help. Mobutu ended up finding him, arresting him, and after a few hours of good old-fashioned torture and beatings, Lumumba and two of his close advisors were murdered. Let's just make this clear. It was President Eisenhower who
Wow. Wow.
That would be the first person that we killed like that.
No,
it wasn't the last either. We did it recently with the head of Bolivia. In order to give the Congolese nothing to remember him by, because we wouldn't want a martyr, Lumumba was cut up and dissolved in sulfuric acid.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So Lumumba's daughter would say in a 2004 interview,
he fought for democracy, social justice, for the real political and economic development of the country. And it must not be forgotten that it was the only elected government until today, 43 years later. Democracy was assassinated in this country.
Now, this assassination caused outrage like so many of the things that came to light in the Congo before. But like every other time in history, it was soon forgotten. And the people were left to fend for their own under a dictator. Mobutu changed the name of the country to Zaire. He did what he could to try to make the country the center of the world's attention. He did that when he hosted the Rumble in the Jungle, which is a famous boxing match between George Foreman and Muhammad Ali. Mobutu was also the guest of multiple American presidents. George H.W. Bush once said while speaking on the grounds of the White House,
Zaire is among America's oldest friends, and its president, President Mobutu, one of our most valued friends in the entire continent of Africa. And we are proud and very, very pleased to have you with us today. Thank you, sir.
Well, like everybody else who ruled the Congo, Mobutu treated it like his own personal piggy bank. At one point, he actually bankrupted the government to the point that it just stopped working. Local tribes were forced to create their own little de facto governments funded by shit like smuggling and human trafficking. Each of these little governments had their own soldiers, and of course, that would mean they fought amongst each other. So eventually, the people of Congo got tired of Mobutu, and he was deposed by rebel leader Laurent Kabila. But like everything else in the story, it never gets better for the Congo. So like every good coup, previous guy's palaces were looted, his army murdered. But Mobutu still ended up escaping with much of his shit. And when he died in September of that year, it was estimated that he was worth like $4 billion. He had a freaking villa on the French Riviera that was only a half mile from Leo's place. They could actually see their two palaces from each other.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it's kind of fucked up.
For fuck's sake. You know what still makes me mad?
What?
What?
That they didn't rename Leopoldville to Lumumbaton. Because Lumumbaton is a great place name.
I forget what it's called now.
Well, it's not Lumumbaton, and that makes me mad.
Not Lumumbaton. No, it's definitely not Lumumbaton.
He's the only one that deserved it.
Yeah, that's right.
That's true. Well, you know, Uganda and Rwanda, those are some of the more friendly African nations. They wanted their cut of what was going on in the Congo at this point. So they tried to depose Kabila so they could take over. This was called the First Congo War, the Africa's first World War. They called it this because there were actually 6 different African nations involved in the Congo at one time. And, like all people, unable to stop themselves from doing what everybody else had done in the Congo, soldiers started pillaging. They didn't even care which side they were pillaging. The Congo became so militarized that by 2002, every male over 12 years old had a fucking assault rifle.
That's great.
Yeah. So Kabila was assassinated, so his son Joseph took over. And in 2003, the UN showed up again to help, Thankfully, not like how they had helped in 1960, 61. But what did come out of this was the expert panel on the exploitation of natural resources and other forms of wealth in the Congo. Yes, that is a terrible fucking name. I don't know who came up with it. Probably somebody at DC, like the guy who came up with Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of one Harley Quinn.
Hey.
That's a terrible name.
It is a terrible name.
Such a terrible name. But what they did find out, which to us isn't very surprising, that the Congo had been exploited and was still being exploited. It was these problems that kept the nation on the verge of economic disaster and in a constant state of civil war since receiving its independence in 1961, when their only democratic, elected president was killed. Prime Minister, I'm sorry. The panel even named the 157 companies who were still profiting in the Congo. These included some criminal enterprises, some terrorist organizations, but some were just like regular companies like Barclays fucking Bank or Trinitech Industries, which is an American mining company.
Wow.
In the period from independence to 2006, which was when the next democratic elections were held, so we only stopped democracy there for 45 years, between 3 and 4 million more Congolese died from famine, disease, or at the hands of the military. This includes people not just directly shot by the military per se, but also people who died because of what the military did, like, say, burn down their village and leave them with no food or shelter. So today, the Democratic Republic of the Congo continues to be a mess, even if it continues to be home to some of the most desired resources in the world. You got gold and copper. Its people remain among the poorest in the world. Just to throw out some numbers, the gross domestic product per capita per person is $843. Compare that to the United States, where it's $63,000, and you see just how terribly run their economy is, GDP-wise. The average Congolese person is worth 1.3% of the average American. And that sounds fucked up. Today's resource of choice is something called coltan, which is actually a combination of columbite and tantalite. A couple of my favorite lights.
Ooh, tantalite sounds like a sex metal.
It does. I've been studying tantalite, which is a big deal for computers and cell phone components, much like rubber was, to electricity and shit in the 1890s. And unfortunately for the people of the Congo, 73% of the world's reserves are in the Congo. Oh, and by the way, coltan's radioactive, and the people mine it without any protective gear because, God, why would they be given any protective gear?
Oh, no.
Which has caused an increase in birth defects and cancer. But what, like I just said, why would we expect anybody to give a fuck? Historian Jan van Sina was quoted as saying,
"We are dealing with the mortality that is associated with a system of exploitation that is based on unbridled capitalism. Whatever happens, the only thing that counts are the profits."
And just to demonstrate to y'all how well the Belgians hid what Leo did, Jules Marchal, the Belgian official who made the earlier statement about the whip, didn't know about the red rubber terror until the 1970s. And he had been stationed in the Congo for years. He found out about it when he was reading a Liberian newspaper. He was so shocked at what the paper was saying, he went to his government seeking evidence to defend Belgium against these baseless attacks. But nothing ever came because there was nothing to defend it. And in 1983, he was finally given access to a judicial record that hadn't been burned. And like Morel and Casement before him, he wrote a lot of stuff about the Congo. But again, not too surprisingly, he was met with a lot of disbelief. And this is in the 1980s now, right? So after all, Leo had made Belgium what it had become, right? It was a top 30 world economy. It was a member of NATO now. It's like there's this trade-off when you need to decide, is the bullshit you've been taught what you're going to hold on to with like dear life, or you're going to have the balls to kind of like seek the truth, even if it makes you feel bad? I guess the Belgians, like most everybody else would, have chosen to just kind of live the lie. But Why do you think we like people do that? Like, why do we hold on to shit that we know isn't right? Like Columbus, he wasn't the first guy here. People didn't really believe the world was flat in 1492, but we still hold on to all that shit. Like, and I know this is a bit deep for this, but why do you guys think that we hold on to that shit? Like, does it make us feel comfortable? Like, does other stuff scare us? Like,
I think it's because if you can plead ignorance, then you can excuse inaction.
Right.
Right.
Because if you think about every story that we got told growing up, even in school, I mean, we just went through Thanksgiving, and the fact is that the reaction to people talking about what Thanksgiving was really like is basically, can you shut up for 2 fucking seconds because I just want to eat some turkey with my family?
Right.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's not excusing it in any way whatsoever. It's, if history has proven anything in America specifically, but in the world in general, is that might does make right.
Right.
And very rarely does the little guy win.
Right.
So since everybody thinks of themselves as a little guy, saying a bunch of stuff that's going to piss a bunch of people off has diminishing returns after a while, because you're only going to convince like 1 out of 50.
Right.
And even if you convince 1 out of 50, those people aren't going to be able to do anything.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's nobody is I'm sorry, I'm kind of soapboxing a little bit here, but I mean, people are basically selfish.
Right.
And the fact is that if we wanted to, we could go, hey, you know what? We're only going to elect representatives that are going to give huge chunks of land and money and infrastructure to Native American tribes that we screwed over.
Right.
But nobody does that.
Yeah.
They talk about how the school buses are uncomfortable and why we still need daylight savings time and shit like that.
Right.
Because people don't want to think about the enormity of pain that has been caused and is still occurring. And once in a while, something will happen that will shove it into everybody's face. And I'll use for the example George Floyd.
Right. That's a perfect one for 2020.
But then what did the powerful people do? The powerful people took their money and influence and they changed it into defund the police, which means that somebody's going to come and rape your face in the middle of the night and it's going to be your own fault. And it went away.
There was a guy who was a congressman in Staten Island who was in the military, who marched in a BLM protest, not defunding the police, none of that shit. But the person running against him took the picture of him on a BLM march, threw a bunch of retired asshole cops in an advertisement saying, when he did that, it was like giving me the finger. Direct line from the advertisement. And the guy fucking lost his seat.
People will trade blame for quiet. It's like husbands in marriages.
Well, you see a lot of it, like you saw it, like I try to stay off Facebook now, but like all the people, like when the election was over, like, oh, now I don't have to think about politics. Like, no, you don't just think about what's going on in the fucking world when there's an election going on. Like, all that shit doesn't go away just but they do. We don't have to elect somebody.
But they do, because people's worlds are in some cases necessarily small.
Yeah.
And the fact is that very rarely does somebody have an instance where politics directly helped them.
Yeah.
Right.
It's very hard to point. It's my best example is the Jamie Harrison, the guy that ran for Senate in South Carolina. He told the story. He told it a bunch of times on basically all of his stump speeches. He said that he was campaigning everywhere and he went to this old dirt road way out in the country and he knocked on the guy's door and the guy was like, "What do you want?" And he said, "Oh, I'm running for Senate," and blah, blah, blah. And the guy goes, you know that dirt road that you drove up here on? And he was like, yeah. He goes, it was dirt when Reagan was president, and it was dirt when Clinton was president, and it was dirt when Bush was president, and it was dirt when Obama was president. So nothing you guys do affects me because it doesn't affect my road.
Right.
And times that by the problems that millions of people have all the time. Yes, we're more polarized. Yes, we're being made more polarized because of the profit-taking measures of social media. But the fact of the matter is that most people just want... like, my biggest worry today was that you guys were going to hear that fucking kid on his slow-ass mini bike driving up the walk, and it would come through on the recording. I mean,
Right.
the Tip O'Neill said all politics is local, and to some degree that's true.
Yeah.
As far as large-scale atrocities, people can't get their head around it.
Yeah.
People
you
can't...
look at, if you want to like put atrocities on a list, you got Hitler and Stalin and Leo, and you can't pin it on one American president, but you have what we did to the indigenous people of this continent. That's got to be up there in numbers with these other three. Considering Columbus killed over 1 million people, and that was on a couple of islands in the Caribbean. So,
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, let's get back on track.
So basically, not only does history suck, but so does the present.
Yeah. So to this day, they still teach in the Congo that King Leopold II was a great benefactor to the people, that he sacrificed his personal fortune for the people of the Congo. Of course, that's bullshit, but we learned from QAnon and what we were all just talking about that bullshit does sell. And like I said, the story of the great King Leopold II is one that they still do. But more folks like us are learning the truth because, I just learned about this like a month ago. So, yes.
Well, but now I want to advertise the show in Belgium.
well, I'll have to have it translated to Flemish. I don't know what Flemish is, but I'm assuming it's like it's kind of Frenchish. That's why I did a French accent.
There you go.
Because I don't know what Flemish is other than the loogie or something.
The Belgians speak English very well and are happy to speak it with you. Brussels seemed completely French dominated as far as language spoken, so just the basic greeting should do fine.
Yeah.
No way. Well, see that we could start a new Belgian revolution.
There you go.
Interesting.
Power to the people. I did say last episode that the number of dead during Leo's time is disputed. Some people think it could be as little as only a couple of million. Others say it's as high as 15 million. The main problem being that there wasn't a census until 1921. So, when they did do the census, it was about 10 million people, and it's believed that the country was half as full as it was 30 years earlier. So that's where they come up with the 10 million. One of the philosophical arguments that continues today is about whether what happened in the Congo should qualify as a genocide. Now, the primary argument against it is that, sure, millions of people died, right? Whatever. But Leo his purpose wasn't to kill them. So they don't really think it should count as a genocide.
Huh.
Well,
that's an interesting and terrible.
It's like well, if he wanted to make money, why would he treat his workers poorly? It's like, what? They used the whip until 1959.
I would say, and I mean, this is all semantic bullshit, but I would say, no, it's not a genocide because if his goal had been, I want to kill all the Congolese people would be dead.
Right.
So
true.
You know what I mean? I don't think he gave a shit about
so wanton
them.
disregard doesn't qualify as a
Right. Genocide. I mean, well, think about it. I don't know what the side part means. Like, I don't know what the etymology of it is. But homicide is you kill somebody else. Suicide is you kill yourself.
Right.
So genocide is you kill. I mean, they died, but they died as a means to an end, which is almost in a way worse.
Right.
Right.
Yikes.
So that's closer to like what happened to like indigenous people here.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there was plenty of killing them to get rid of them, but
but we did it like in a shitty way, right? Like we didn't just kill them; we pretended to
be
do
their
treaties and be their friends.
Right.
Then we killed them when it
Exactly.
wasn't suitable. That didn't suit us anymore. Well, things are starting to turn around a little bit. All right. So in 2012, Thomas Lubanga, a Congolese warlord, was actually convicted and sentenced to 14 years in prison by the International Court in The Hague. He was convicted of using child soldiers. And in 2019, another Congolese warlord, Bosco Ntaganda, also known as the Terminator, was convicted and sentenced to 30 years for 18 counts of war crimes dating back to like 2002, 2003. His charges included murder, rape, and sexual slavery. So while these are only very small victories for the Congolese, at least somebody's finally holding someone accountable for something. And just before I wrap up, I just want to say that there's definitely a lot of stuff we didn't cover, like the effects of the Rwandan genocide on the Congo, the Second Congo War, and stuff like that. If you want to know more, I don't know why you would, but if you do, check out King Leopold's Ghost by Adam Hochschild. That's actually the book I used, and the accompanying movie, if you want to cheat a little bit. But thank you all for listening and indulging me. If you'd like to reach out to us, you can get me at Shooey Time on Twitter and Instagram. You can get Acadia on Twitter at Acadia, on Instagram at Acadia Einstein, and on Twitch at Senator Acadia. You can get Mel's at MelsBells84 on Twitter, Superficial Mel's on Instagram. And you can reach out to the show on Twitter, Strangeful Pod, or Strangeful Things on Instagram.
Yes, and if you have a moment, please take that to rate and review us. Give us 5 stars if you don't mind. If you don't want to do that, then reach out to us and let us know why. But just rate and review us nicely, please.
Including, I would like to point out that I was running through a bunch of podcast directories to make sure that we were actually in them. And I saw 2 very nice reviews from someone named Steve and someone named MHB in one of them. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
If you love us so much that you've decided that we're worth subsidizing, you can go to patreon.com/strangeful. We have some special content that we do for folks that are patrons, or if you want to just support us and let us know you're there, then we have one level that's super low, and it means just as much as the ones that are super high, and we appreciate you. And I guess that's all the shilling that we have to do, huh?
Yeah. Be sure to count your blessings.
Don't forget to keep on flapping.
Bye-bye.